My sons are geniuses. Sheikh Mohammed al-Rashid's voice cracked with emotion as he stood in the doorway of his palatial Dubai estate, watching something that 6 months ago he would have sworn was impossible. On the floor of the sunlit playroom, his 3 identical 7-year-old triplets, Kareem, Rashid, and Faisal, sat in a perfect circle with Amara, their African special education teacher. Their hands moved in elaborate synchronized patterns, creating flowing gestures that looked like a beautiful, silent dance. The boys were laughing, actually laughing, their faces bright with joy as they communicated in the extraordinary secret language they had created. Amara caught Sheikh Mohammed's eye and smiled, that knowing, triumphant smile of someone who had seen what everyone else had missed. For months, the world had called these boys disabled, broken, limited. Expensive doctors had used words like severe cognitive impairment and nonverbal disorder. Elite therapists from 3 continents had declared them unreachable. But this black woman from a small agency in London had discovered something that would shock the medical community, transform 3 young lives forever, and force one of Dubai's wealthiest men to confront the devastating truth about his own prejudice and blindness. What happens next would change everything they thought they knew about intelligence, communication, and the breathtaking capacity of the human mind to create connection where others see only silence. Amara Washington had received the call about the Al-Rashid case on a cold January morning, sitting in her cramped London flat with overdue bills spread across her kitchen table. 12 years she had spent working with nonverbal children, kids that mainstream education had given up on, students whose brilliance expressed itself in ways the world refused to recognize. The agency recruiter had been blunt about the situation. 3 identical Arab triplets, now 7 years old, living in unimaginable wealth in Dubai, with their millionaire father. Diagnosed as severely cognitively impaired, nonverbal since birth. Multiple specialists had failed. The pay was exceptional, 6 months guaranteed, but the expectations were low. Sheikh Mohammed al-Rashid just wanted someone to provide basic care and perhaps teach the boys simple life skills, nothing more. The recruiter had actually said those exact words, nothing more, as if Amara should understand that hoping for any real breakthrough would be foolish. She had almost turned down the job. Almost. But something in the description nagged at her. The detail that all 3 boys exhibited the same behaviors, moved in similar patterns, seemed to exist in synchronized isolation. That synchronization meant something. It had to. She arrived in Dubai 3 weeks later, stepping out of the hired car into heat that hit her like a physical wall. The Al-Rashid estate rose before her like something from a fantasy, all white marble and gold accents, fountains that probably cost more than her childhood home. A staff member, one of many, led her through corridors lined with artwork she recognized from textbooks, past rooms larger than most people's entire apartments. Sheikh Mohammed met her in his office, a space dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens and an Olympic-sized pool. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 40, wearing traditional white kandura and gutra with the ease of someone born to wealth and authority. His handshake was firm, but his eyes were tired, carrying the weight of years spent searching for answers that never came. He spoke perfect English, with a British accent acquired at Oxford, his tone polite but professionally distant. He explained that his ex-wife, a French model he had married young, had left when the boys were 2, unable to cope with their condition. He had tried everything, spent millions, consulted with specialists whose names she would recognize. Nothing had worked. His sons were 7 now, still in diapers, still unable to communicate, still living in whatever locked world their minds inhabited. He loved them, he insisted, but he had accepted reality. All he wanted now was someone patient and kind to help them through their days. Amara had learned long ago to keep her thoughts to herself during these initial meetings. Parents, especially wealthy ones, especially fathers, didn't appreciate being told their assumptions might be wrong. So she nodded, took notes, asked practical questions about routines and dietary restrictions and medical considerations. Sheikh Mohammed seemed relieved by her professionalism, clearly grateful she wasn't another optimist, making promises about breakthroughs and miracles. He had heard enough of those, had his hopes raised and crushed too many times, As he walked her to the specialized wing where the boys spent their days, he made one thing very clear. "Do not give me false hope," he said, his voice tight with old pain. "I have accepted who my sons are. I just want them comfortable and safe." She had promised him nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because she had learned that promises meant nothing until you understood what you were actually dealing with. The boys' wing was immaculate, designed by pediatric specialists to be both stimulating and calming. Soft colors, specialized equipment, safety features everywhere. 3 identical cribs for sleeping even though the boys were 7 because they couldn't be trusted in regular beds. 3 identical play areas, separated by low barriers. Everything triple, everything controlled, everything designed around limitation. But the moment Amara entered the main playroom and saw Kareem, Rashid, and Faisal for the first time, her entire body went still with recognition. They were beautiful, these 3 identical boys with dark curls and golden skin and eyes like their fathers. They wore matching casual clothes, soft cotton pants and shirts in different colors, blue and green and red, so the staff could tell them apart. And they were doing exactly what the reports had described, engaging in repetitive behaviors, stimming, existing in their own worlds. Except they weren't. Kareem sat near the window, his fingers tapping against his left thigh in a precise rhythm. 3 quick taps, pause, 2 slower taps, pause, 4 rapid taps. His eyes seemed focused on nothing, staring into middle distance. Across the room, Rashid rocked slightly in his seat, his right hand moving in small circular motions near his shoulder, then dropping to his lap, then rising to make a different gesture near his ear. Faisal, closest to where Amara stood, was humming, a low monotone sound, while his hands opened and closed in specific patterns. The staff member who had brought her, a kind Filipina woman named Maria, sighed with familiar sadness. "This is what they do all day, every day," she explained. "We try to redirect them to activities, but they always go back to this. It's heartbreaking." Amara didn't respond because her mind was racing, cataloging, connecting. She had seen this before. Not exactly this, but something close enough to make her pulse quicken with possibility. She asked Maria for one favor. Just one. "Leave me alone with them for 2 hours. No cameras, no monitoring, no interruptions. Just 2 hours to observe." Maria hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the request, but Amara's credentials were impressive enough, and Sheikh Mohammed had given instructions to accommodate the new teacher within reason. So Maria left, promising to return at exactly 2 hours, and Amara was finally alone with 3 boys the world had declared unreachable. She didn't try to touch them or redirect them or interrupt their behaviors. She simply sat down on the floor, cross-legged, 10 feet away from the nearest boy, Faisal, and she watched, really watched, Kareem's tapping pattern. 3 quick, pause, 2 slow, pause, 4 rapid. 17 seconds later, Rashid's hand moved in that circular pattern near his shoulder, followed by the drop to lap, followed by the gesture near his ear. 22 seconds after that, Faisal's humming changed pitch slightly, and his hands opened and closed twice. Then Kareem started again, but with a different pattern this time. 4 quick taps, pause, 3 slow, pause, 5 rapid. The intervals were different, but proportional. The response pattern from Rashid changed accordingly. Faisal's humming shifted to a new pitch sequence. They were talking. These 3 boys, who everyone said couldn't communicate, were having a conversation right in front of her, had probably been having conversations for years, while doctors and therapists and their own father watched and saw only disability and limitation. Amara pulled out her phone and started recording, not the boys directly, but her own voice, as she narrated what she was observing. Timestamps, pattern descriptions, response intervals, everything. By the end of the first hour, she had documented over 40 distinct exchange sequences. The patterns were complex, multi-layered, incorporating rhythm, gesture, sound, and timing. It was a complete language, sophisticated and functional, created by 3 7-year-old minds that had found a way to connect when the world couldn't understand them. By the end of the second hour, she had done something else, something that made her hands shake with excitement and possibility. She had started to learn their language. When Kareem made his 3-tap pattern, she tapped her own thigh in response, mimicking what Rashid usually did. All three boys went completely still. 6 identical eyes turned toward her for the first time, really seeing her, really acknowledging her presence. Faisal made a new sound she hadn't heard before, and Rashid's hands moved in a rapid gesture sequence that felt like a question. She had just announced her presence in their world, and they were responding with curiosity and surprise. When Maria returned exactly 2 hours later, she found Amara still sitting on the floor, tears streaming down her face, while 3 supposedly unreachable boys sat in a semicircle around her, engaged and alert, and clearly, unmistakably communicating. The next 4 months were the most challenging and rewarding of Amara's career. She couldn't simply tell Sheikh Mohammed what she had discovered because he wouldn't believe her. He had heard too many theories, too many explanations from too many experts. She needed to decode their language completely, learn to communicate with the boys fluently, and then demonstrate something so undeniable that even a skeptical millionaire father couldn't dismiss it. So she went to work with systematic patience, spending 10 hours a day with Karim, Rashid, and Faisal, documenting every gesture, every sound, every pattern. She filled 17 notebooks with observations and translations. She recorded hundreds of hours of video on her personal devices, creating a comprehensive dictionary of their language. And slowly, gradually, she started communicating with them, started asking questions in their own system, and receiving answers that proved these boys weren't cognitively impaired at all. They were brilliant. Their language had grammar, syntax, emotional indicators, even humor. They had names for people in their household, had opinions about their daily routines, had thoughts and feelings and ideas they had been expressing for years, while everyone around them saw only meaningless behavior. Sheikh Mohammed watched from a distance, his face a mask of professional patience mixed with barely concealed pity. He thought Amara was another well-meaning teacher, convincing herself she was making progress, when really she was just projecting meaning onto random behaviors. He had seen it before. The breakthrough moment came in the 5th month, late May, during an afternoon session when all 3 boys were particularly animated. Amara had been teaching them traditional written language alongside learning their own system, helping them understand that communication could take many forms. They were learning to read, actually learning faster than typical children, because their minds were hungry for connection with the wider world. That day, Karim had picked up a marker and drawn something on the whiteboard in their playroom. 3 circles connected by lines, with smaller circles inside. Rashid and Faisal had immediately responded with excited gesture sequences, and Amara had asked, using their language, what the drawing meant. Karim's response, translated through the system she had spent months decoding, was stunning. It was a map of their family. The 3 large circles were them, the triplets, connected because they were brothers and because they could talk to each other. The smaller circles inside were their thoughts and feelings that they kept protected. And there was a 4th circle, separate from the others, larger and alone. That was their father. Amara had asked why their father's circle was separate, and Faisal's response had nearly broken her heart. Because he thinks we're broken, the gesture sequence communicated. Because he can't hear us. The boys knew. They had always known. They understood that their father loved them but also pitied them, that the world saw them as disabled, that their extraordinary language was invisible to everyone except each other. Until now, Amara knew the time had come. She requested a meeting with Sheikh Mohammed, insisting it was urgent, insisting he needed to see something immediately. He agreed with obvious reluctance, probably expecting another update about small improvements in behavior or daily living skills. He arrived at the playroom at 5 in the evening, still wearing his business clothes from a day of meetings, his expression already set in that patient, polite mask she had come to recognize. The boys were sitting in their usual circle, and Amara was on the floor with them. And Sheikh Mohammed started to ask what this was about when Amara held up one hand for silence. Then she turned to Karim and made a specific gesture sequence, 3 distinct movements combined with a pattern of sounds. It meant, "Tell your father your name." Karim's eyes widened slightly. Then he turned to look directly at his father, making eye contact in a way he never had before. His hands moved in their language, a flowing sequence that Amara simultaneously translated aloud. "My name is Karim. I am 7 years old. I am not broken. Sheikh Mohammed froze, his mouth opening slightly. But before he could speak, Amara gestured to Rashid. The second triplet looked at his father and communicated, "My name is Rashid. I love mathematics and patterns. I can count to 1,000 in my head." Then Faisal. "My name is Faisal. I remember everything I see. I know all the people who work in this house, and all their names." The color drained from Sheikh Mohammed's face as he stood there, watching his three sons communicate with perfect clarity, perfect intention, perfect intelligence. Amara continued, asking the boys questions in their language and translating their responses. She asked what they wanted to eat for dinner, and they answered specifically, with preferences and dislikes. She asked what they thought about their daily routine, and they had opinions. Some activities they enjoyed, and others they found boring. She asked if they loved their father, and all three responded with emphatic gestures that meant yes, yes, always, yes. Then she asked the question she had been building toward for months. She asked if they wanted to learn how to communicate in the way their father could understand, if they wanted to bridge the gap between their language and his world. All three boys responded with the most enthusiastic affirmative gestures in their entire system, a specific movement that meant more than yes, that meant please, desperately, finally. Sheikh Mohammed sank into a chair, his hand pressed against his mouth, tears streaming down his face without sound or movement. He was watching his sons be alive, truly alive, for the first time in their 7 years. Amara walked over to him, her voice gentle but firm. "They're not disabled, Sheikh Mohammed. They never were. They created something extraordinary because the world couldn't meet them where they were, so they built their own way of connecting. They've been talking to each other their entire lives. They're brilliant. And they're ready to learn to talk to you too." The transformation over the next month was extraordinary. Amara worked with the boys to learn spoken Arabic and English while teaching Sheikh Mohammed the basics of their original language, creating a bridge between two worlds. She brought in linguistics experts from universities who documented the boys' language with astonishment, declaring it one of the most sophisticated, naturally developed communication systems ever recorded. Neurologists confirmed what Amara had insisted. These boys had no cognitive impairments at all. They were actually testing above average in every area once you communicated with them in a way they could understand, or gave them alternative methods of expression. Their years of isolation had been caused not by disability, but by the world's failure to recognize that intelligence and communication can look different than expected. Sheikh Mohammed was devastated and transformed in equal measure. He had spent years mourning sons who were never lost, had accepted limitations that never existed, had let shame and frustration blind him to the miracle happening right in front of his eyes. He apologized to his boys every day, sometimes in words they were learning, and sometimes in the gesture language he was slowly mastering. And the boys forgave him with the uncomplicated grace of children who had never stopped loving their father even when he couldn't see who they really were. The day that changed everything came 6 months to the day after Amara had first arrived at the Al-Rashid estate. Sheikh Mohammed had called a gathering of everyone who had ever worked with his sons, all the therapists and doctors and specialists who had declared them unreachable. He had also invited members of Dubai's medical community, journalists from major publications, and education officials from the government. They assembled in the large reception hall of his estate, probably expecting some kind of charity announcement or research funding initiative. Instead, they witnessed something that would make international news within hours. Amara sat on the floor in the center of the room, surrounded by Karim, Rashid, and Faisal. For 30 minutes, she demonstrated their language, communicating with the boys in flowing gestures and sounds, while simultaneously translating for the audience. The boys answered complex questions, solved mathematical problems, recited stories they had memorized, and demonstrated memory and reasoning skills that left the assembled experts speechless. Then came the moment that cameras captured and would replay millions of times across social media. Sheikh Mohammed walked into the center of the circle and knelt down with his sons. Using the gesture language he had been practicing, he communicated something directly to them without Amara's translation. His movements were hesitant but clear. "I am sorry. I love you. I see you now." All three boys responded by wrapping their arms around their father, and Sheikh Mohammed Al-Rashid, one of Dubai's wealthiest and most powerful men, sobbed into his son's shoulders, while the room watched in stunned silence. The aftermath was seismic. The video went viral globally, accumulating over 200 million views in the first week. Major news organizations ran features about the triplets and their secret language. Medical journals published papers about the case, examining how 3 children had independently developed a sophisticated communication system and what it meant for understanding neurodevelopment and language acquisition. Universities offered to study the boys, though Sheikh Mohammed declined most requests, protective of his son's privacy after years of treating them like medical curiosities. But he did agree to one thing that Amara had proposed. He established the Al-Rashid Foundation for Alternative Communication, funding research and education programs for children who communicated differently than expected. He hired Amara as the permanent director, paying her a salary that erased her debts and secured her future, while giving her resources to help thousands of other children who might be brilliant in ways the world hadn't learned to recognize. The foundation's mission statement was simple, written by Karim, Rashid, and Faisal themselves, using their expanding vocabulary. Every mind speaks. It just might not use words you expect. Listen differently. Sheikh Mohammed had the statement carved in marble at the foundation's entrance in both English and Arabic, and below it, in smaller letters, he added his own message. I failed to listen. I will spend my life making sure no other parent makes my mistake. Before we wrap this story up, I'd like to thank you for reaching this far. And if you enjoyed this story as much as I think you did, then be sure to show your support by liking and subscribing, so this channel can reach more people like you. Now, back to the story. As for the boys themselves, their journey continued with joy and challenges in equal measure. They learned spoken language gradually, finding that while they could communicate verbally, their original gesture system remained their most natural and comfortable method of expression, especially with each other. They became advocates for neurodiversity, speaking at conferences and schools, demonstrating their language and teaching others that different doesn't mean disabled. They pursued their individual interests, Rashid in mathematics, Faisal in art and memory studies, Karim in linguistics and education. They remained inseparable, 3 identical boys who had survived years of being misunderstood by creating something beautiful and unbreakable between them. And they kept Amara in their lives as teacher, advocate, and friend. The woman who had looked at their supposedly meaningless behaviors and seen brilliance, who had spent months learning to listen in a way no one else had bothered to try. Sheikh Mohammed never fully forgave himself for the years he lost with his sons, but he channeled that regret into action, becoming one of the world's leading advocates for reconsidering how we define intelligence and ability. The boys taught him their language completely, and he used it with them every day, a private family communication that represented both their past isolation and their current connection. The story of the Al-Rashid triplets became a touchstone in discussions about disability, neurodiversity, and the assumptions we make about minds that work differently than our own, a reminder that sometimes what we call disability is actually just our own failure to listen properly, to look beyond our expectations, to recognize that brilliant communication can exist in forms we never anticipated.